Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This Is Nashville, engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com.
I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. They're on, they're off, they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off? Is anyone else experiencing Trump tariff whiplash? Besides being a metaphoric pain in the neck, what exactly are tariffs? And what real effect will they have on businesses and consumers here in Tennessee? And later on this hour, we're going to check in with an international trade expert and a small business owner to explore these taxes on imported goods and services. But first, right now, Tennessee lawmakers are considering a bill to remove protections for certain types of wetlands across the state to financially benefit developers. Joining us to discuss the bill in depth is WPLN environmental reporter Caroline Eggers. Caroline, so good to have you. Welcome back to This Is Nashville.
Thank you.
Okay, so you've been following the bill at the legislature that would open more Tennessee wetlands to developments. First, why are these wetlands given protection in the first place?
In the 1970s, there was this cultural awakening to the issues of pollution and natural resource depletion. And Tennessee was ahead of the federal government on this. In 1971, the state passed protections for our water and the systems that affect our water, including wetlands.
How do they benefit our environment?
Wetlands are a part of our water systems. So really, they interact with all of our ecosystems. This includes permanent wetlands and what's called isolated wetlands, which connect to our water systems underground or through storms. The legislation targets isolated wetlands. These wetlands can reduce flood impacts by absorbing floodwaters. They can filter pollution, even pollution like PFAS. They recharge streams, rivers, and aquifers, and this is particularly important during droughts. And they provide critical habitat for plants and animals. For these reasons, a single acre has been conservatively valued at nearly $50,000.
That's something else. All right, so has there been more involvement, more movement at the national level in regard to wetland regulations?
So the Supreme Court made a decision 2 years ago that said the states could decide whether or not to protect a type of wetland called isolated wetlands. Many states lost their protections, but since Tennessee's protections existed before the Federal Clean Water Act, ours remained. I listened to a Senate hearing today, and the Senate sponsor, Brent Taylor, claimed that other states that don't have protections are not having issues related to wetlands. But that isn't true. He mentioned South Carolina. Well, yesterday, a town in South Carolina became the first city in that state to pass an ordinance that requires local permits for wetlands. They wanted to protect their wetlands in the absence of state or federal protections because the town has seen on the ground how wetland loss affects their community. Senator Taylor also mentioned Kentucky. When I reported in Bowling Green, which is just an hour north of here, I heard from scientists about how the lack of wetland protections is worsening water pollution in karst, which are limestone landscapes of caves, sinkholes, underground water. We have them here in Tennessee too. So you'll hear a lot that there's a variety of wetlands across the states. That's been one of the main arguments to why states should set their own regulations. But the thing is, wetlands are a critical part of our ecosystems. So wetland loss has been shown to cause issues in every single state.
All right, so what does this bill that's making its way through the legislature actually do?
As it's written now, it just got some new amendments this week. The bill strips legal protections for most of our isolated wetlands to financially benefit developers. Currently, developers can develop wetlands, but there's a financial incentive for them to not disturb our resources, or if they do, they pay mitigation for wetlands nearby. Without that guardrail, developers will be able to just build with little consideration to wetlands. The amendment has been presented as a compromise, but it's really worded in a way strategically to cover what I imagine is most common development scenarios.
Okay, so give us a sense of how much of the state's individual wetlands would be affected by this.
So we recently got some new data analysis of our isolated wetlands. From an acreage percentage, this could affect nearly half of them. But in terms of the wetlands that developers are actually likely to develop, I think this would affect the vast majority. So we have tiny slices of wetlands all over the state. There's an estimated more than 400,000 individual wetlands. Some are large, but more than 90% of these wetlands are less than 2 acres in size. And this is the size of the wetland that the bill basically says we don't need to protect. In a typical development project, developers would have to consider all of these little slices of wetlands on the property cumulatively to determine how much they would have to pay for mitigation or maybe like design around. But now the bill says they wouldn't have to. They would only have to consider each wetland individually. So now even massive sprawling projects that cover many, many acres, they could get away with destroying a lot of wetlands because each one's small.
Which legislator is sponsoring this bill?
Representative Kevin Vaughn is the primary sponsor. He's a developer from West Tennessee, not far from Memphis, and he could stand to financially benefit himself with future development projects that he's involved in. I reported last year how he was involved in one project where the developers illegally filled and drained a wetland.
Okay, so what's the reason he gives for this being a necessary change?
The bill would save developers time and money.
Okay. Is there any pushback against it, and where or who is it coming from?
Yes, there has been pushback from environmental groups and multiple state agencies, including the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency. I attended the governor's private conservation summit back in the fall, and that was very revealing. They had a moment where they had each table at the conference discuss their biggest conservation concern in Tennessee. And I heard state officials and advocates say wetland protection was the single biggest issue in Tennessee.
Okay, so what concerns does TEMA have with this bill?
Last year, I heard testimony from someone at TEMA who said, if we destroy more wetlands, we're going to have more issues with flooding.
That's pretty serious.
Yes.
Okay, so if they believe this is the single biggest issue in the state, tell us what damage can be done by developers if this bill is passed?
Well, they could destroy a lot of our wetlands, and that will harm our water systems.
Simple enough. All right, so the bill was recently amended. What does the new amendment do?
So basically, the amendment has language about the size of wetlands, the cumulative impact, and artificial wetlands. I mentioned the size and cumulative aspects. The bill also says that developers would not need to consider artificial wetlands, and the way the bill defines them includes many types of natural wetlands, including those made by beavers.
So where does this bill stand now? What hurdles does it have to clear before it becomes law?
It passed a key Senate committee this week and was expected to pass another House committee as well.
All right. Is there anything else you're following at the state legislature this year in terms of our environment and things?
There's a bill to protect pesticide companies from lawsuits of people who were harmed by using their products. Many Tennesseans are familiar with Monsanto, which is now Bayer, and they are backing this bill. And that corporation has been facing lawsuits from people who have likely gotten cancer from exposure to Roundup, which is an agricultural product. And this new bill would protect companies like Monsanto from these types of lawsuits. And that bill is moving through some committees now. There's also a bill that would legally define gas, which our listeners in Nashville know is a fossil fuel, as renewable energy. That has passed the House, and it still has to face some Senate committees.
Very interesting things happening at the state capitol. Caroline Eggers is WPLN's environmental reporter. You can find her continuing coverage on this legislation and other things involving our environment at WPLN.org. Caroline, thanks again.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk tariffs with an expert from MTSU and the manager of a small family farm in Benton County, Tennessee. And it's your turn to talk, so give us a call, 615-760-2000, to let us know your feelings on tariffs. Are you in support? Do you oppose them? Or are you just plain scared of them? Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from Burr and Foreman Law Firm, serving clients with transactional, litigation, and regulatory needs. Discovering how each client defines a win and working with them every step of the way to achieve it. Burr.com. Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP, and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. We're going to turn our attention to tariffs in just a moment, but first, as you know, the conversations we have often continue after the show, and we always invite you to call to leave us a message with your thoughts. We've heard from several of you, our listeners, about some previous episodes. Last month, we discussed the conflicting nature of school threat assessment laws in Tennessee and the unintended consequences they've created. Attorney and school board member for Murfreesboro City Schools, Jimmy Richardson, left this comment for us.
Hey, this is Attorney Jimmy Richardson and school board member of the Murfreesboro City School. I was listening to the program about the threat of mass violence charges. The statute is such that I've had a client who wrote in a diary months and months ago that she felt so antagonized and so depressed and so hurt that she just wanted to kill everybody. Now, no one looked at that diary for months and months and months. Was she making a threat at that time? Was that still a threat 6 months later? The police seem to think that it was a real and immediate threat. And based off of this very badly written law, the courts thought so too. Eventually it was thrown out, and many of these bad cases are. But many of these children don't have the luxury of an attorney, even an appointed attorney that can speak to the depth and the breadth of the violative nature of the First Amendment that this law provides. It's a very bad law that has real and significant consequences.
We also heard from lifelong Nashvilleian Lindsay about the crime rate in Nashville.
Hi, this is Lindsay. I am a lifelong Nashvilleian, actually fifth or sixth generation. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. I just wanted to comment on this idea that crime rates are on the rise in Nashville. It's fully inaccurate. Violent crime rates have been steadily trending down for years, and that is consistent here in our state.
Last but not least, Neil from Smyrna called with a very personal story relating to our episode on immigration.
Hi, my name is Neil from Smyrna. I'm calling because I just dropped off my son-in-law at the airport. He and my wife's daughter were married a year and a half ago. He's living in Canada. He's originally from Ethiopia. And they decided they were probably going to live in Canada, so they married there and then changed their mind. Now he has a child who is less than a month old who lives here with his mother, but he can't stay here because he can't get a work visa. He's still waiting for his permanent green card status, and he's been told that if he muddies up the water by trying to change his status, that it could put his entire immigration status in jeopardy of ever becoming a U.S. citizen. He's unable to stay with his family because he can't work here in the U.S., and they can't afford for him to not be working. This is someone who has, in essence, the best of all situations. He's married to an American. He has a child who is American. He has gone through the proper channels, and, they haven't gotten anywhere, and they can't get any information about his green card status.
We recently received an update from Neil, who told us that after 14 months, his son-in-law received his approved I-130 form that allows him to now apply to the State Department for permanent residency. It's a long process, he told us. You know, and you too can call to leave us a message about anything that we talk about on the show. That number is 615-751-2500, 615-751-2500. Remember, that is the number to call to leave us a message. The number to call to talk to us live, well, you'll hear that in a second. So if you've been reading the headlines, it may be hard to kind of keep up with all of the back and forth of the Trump's administration's tariff policy. To clarify, tariffs are a tax that U.S. importers pay to the U.S. government. An importer or import company buys goods from a foreign country and brings them into the United States to sell. To make up for that tax, importers do one of two things. They raise prices or they don't. If they do, customers are impacted. If they don't, their business is. To help us dissect what's happening right now and to look at the real and potential effect these taxes will have on businesses and consumers in Tennessee is Renee Moore, the owner and manager of the Moore Family Century Farm in Benton County, and Dr. Stephen Livingston, political science professor and associate director of the Business and Economic Research Center at Middle Tennessee State University. Renee and Steve, thank you both for being here. Welcome to This is Nashville.
Thank you for the invitation.
And it's your turn to talk as a consumer. Are you concerned about what tariffs might do to your household budget? As a business owner, are you ready for changing your operations to brace for impact? Give us a call right now. That number is 615-760-2000, 615-760-2000 to share to ask a question or to share a comment. All right, we're going to be getting into this conversation about tariffs, y'all. When you start reading about tariffs, it seems like most products and services will be affected. Agricultural products, aluminum and steel, bourbon, cars, crude oil, fabrics, fishing equipment, meat, orange juice, pajamas. The list goes on. Pharmaceuticals, wine, and champagne. Steve, tell us this. What exactly is the Trump administration trying to do? Do they have a plan? And is what they're trying to do, is it based on an actual economic principle?
Well, that's kind of a big question.
Yes.
I don't know. President Trump has defended tariffs on several different grounds, and the grounds are not always mutually consistent. So exactly what the administration is thinking, I am not certain. I think it is an attempt to transform the American economy, to try to bring back manufacturing jobs, for example, and a sort of sense that a lot of the world is playing the U.S. They're unfair, and so the U.S. really has been playing the sucker for decades, and it's time to put a stop to it. That's my best guess of what's going on.
So if it's potentially to bring back manufacturing, it's going to take a while for manufacturing to come back to the levels that it was decades ago, right?
Oh yes, it would be years. And the other problem you've got is manufacturing is a lot more productive now, and so you could get the output back, but you're not going to get the workers back.
Is there an economic principle attached to this? Like, what economic principle, when someone is to use tariffs, that actually makes sense? What economic principle is the basis of that move?
Well, it would be something along the line of what was called mercantilism, which is the idea that it's very important to be self-sufficient. It's very important to develop your own industries. And so preventing imports from coming into the country is the best way to proceed to make a country that has a safe economy, and would be debatable, but good jobs.
So we understand that some tariffs were implemented and other ones weren't. Do you have an understanding of why he decided not to implement certain tariffs?
Well, there's a couple things going on, and one is I think the administration has realized how difficult it is administratively to just put in place a regime of tariffs. So part of it is they just weren't ready. And part of it is they got pushback, especially with the Canadian and Mexican tariffs, pushback from American manufacturers, American companies. And so it led to I wouldn't say a rethinking, but a sort of desire maybe to not impose things right away.
Now, yesterday it was announced that the Federal Reserve left interest rates unchanged again. And Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, reiterated that the American economy remained on solid footing, but also said that tariffs likely mean, quote, further progress may be delayed, end quote, on getting inflation back to the target 2% goal that's been talked about. Steve, read between the lines for us. What's really going on when they say the future, when they're saying what the future may look like economically? Are we being prepared for a recession?
Well, the first thing is, I think the main thing he's saying is it's tremendous uncertainty. We haven't had a increase in tariffs in the United States since 1930. So what's actually going to happen? Who knows, right? That's the first thing he's saying. And the second thing he's saying is economic logic is that prices will rise. I mean, you increase taxes, prices go up. And if prices rise, I mean, that's inflation. And that's a big job for the Federal Reserve to handle inflation. So he is saying that, well, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he is, I am guessing, saying that you impose high tariffs, you're going to get more inflation, and that's going to impact our ability to manage a money supply.
Economic uncertainty is not something I think Americans want to hear, particularly since 2008, 2009. It seems that we've been up and down with that phrase around us in our lives. Renee, you're a farmer, you're a worker, and you're a consumer. When you hear economic uncertainty in regards to our country's economic future, how do you respond? How do you feel about that?
Silence. The word uncertainty presents itself when we think about this. And as a farmer, as a producer, as a grower, planning is important to us and what we do. And when we're hearing the information about things being on hold, things being frozen, but then things being unfrozen, it's hard for us. The Moore Farm, we've been in existence in Benton County for 155 years. And we have a forest, we have a tree farm, we have row crops, we have a historic trails on our farm. So all of those working parts have to be planned for, and we plan a year in advance for the coming year. And so when this uncertainty presents itself, it's difficult for us to plan, and it impacts us. Our expenses go up, and then we say, well, if we invest this, then will we receive adequate income based on our inputs into the farm? And then with the uncertainty, there are particular reimbursements we receive. And now everybody's questioning, well, are we going to receive the reimbursements? I have some colleagues, farm colleagues all across the country, and everybody is in different stages of impact. And they say, I actually tapped into some other money that I had available for something else that was going on my farm to cover this particular contract that I had received. And now I may not even receive reimbursement for the activity that I've done. And so, all of those things come together, and it really makes it hard for the average farmer to move forward.
I want to mention some of the retaliation you talked about, Steve. The 25% tariffs on metals went into effect on March 12th. And in response, the European Union announced that on April 1st, it would retaliate with tariffs on $28 billion worth of U.S. goods, including steel, aluminum, bourbon, home appliances, and farming products. Then Trump threatened to place a 200% tariff on alcohol from the European Union if they didn't change their minds on at least the U.S. whiskey part. Okay, so Steve, as of now, after all of this back and forth, these tariffs they're kind of now in a place where certain imports from Canada, Mexico, and China, as well as foreign steel and aluminum that are being imported into the United States. There's a tax on steel and aluminum at 25%, which is causing the price of metal to go up. What is making the price of American steel going up at the same time? From what I understand, it's risen 7 or 9%. Why is that?
Well, if you were a rational company, and let's assume that they are,
okay,
and your competitors are forced to raise their prices, well, what are you going to do? I mean, there's money on the table. You could just keep your prices like they were, or you can raise your prices too. And the logical thing to do would be to raise your prices. And there's been research on this, on things like, you remember in washing machines, there were tariffs on washing machines in the first Trump administration. Under the Obama administration, there were tariffs put on tires. And what happened? Well, domestic producers raised their prices too.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekolona. We're discussing tariffs, and it's your turn to talk. Are you concerned about what tariffs might do to your household budget? As a business owner, are you ready to change your operations and to brace for the impact of these tariffs? Call us at 615-760-2000. That's 615-760-2000 to share with us what you're thinking. Okay, so yesterday, Steve, you participated in a town hall recently with the CEOs of 3 Nashville companies, Tosh Farms, Old Smoky Distillery, and Building Company 7, which is a construction company. What was the biggest concern they expressed?
Well, part of their big concern was the uncertainty as well, because they're not really sure what's going to happen. So that was probably the main thing. And then the other thing was the long-term impact on their businesses. For example, the construction company, and there's actually another construction person in the audience, so we heard from 2 people. Wood is a big issue, right? If you're building a house, wood is a big issue. A lot of wood comes in from Canada, and they're in a situation where if the price of wood goes up 25%, it's a mess because they've got contracts to build out there. They can't go back to somebody and say, hey, I got to raise the price of your house 25. They can't do that. They're locked in. So there's all these it's very difficult to make business decisions when you're in an environment where the prices change radically, right? And can I just point out, we're not talking about 1% tariffs. We're talking about 25% tariffs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge.
I'm interested in all of the development plans that are happening just here in Nashville. We've got the East Bank plan. There's got the new Titan Stadium, and also this transit plan that just passed. How that is going to be affected by these rising prices?
Well, it's kind of hard to give specifics at this point, but it's going to be more expensive to do business. Okay, that's just the bottom line.
Renee, you're one of the owner-operator of the Moore Family Century Farm in Benton County, which is over 150 years old. But it's a small farm because it's 200 acres or less.
Correct.
Are you seeing your colleagues and other people in the small farming industry stopping or kind of slowing down production while you wait to see what happens in this environment of uncertainty?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the ongoing conversation. Everybody's in a wait and see holding pattern, and I like to think about and give the audience a picture of who we're talking about, right? So the 80% of the farms in the state are owned by small farmers, and that's 200 acres or less, and that's an important number because I think a lot of people, when they visualize farmers, they visualize a person with over 1,000 acres of land, and the majority of the farmers in the state of Tennessee, I just want to paint a picture that they're Asian, Black, Hispanic, Native, Indigenous, they're Latin, they're Spanish, they're white. They're women, they're men, they're husbands, uncles, aunties. I just want to put a human face on what we're talking about because I think that's important because we say the word farmers and we talk about economics and it just becomes a intellectual conversation, but we're really talking about people's lives. We're talking about people who already are working 2 jobs. They have a day job and they are a farmer as well. And so, but the farmers, we also understand the value of farming and the legacy of farming, and a lot of farmers don't want to leave farming. And so, those things are very important. And so everybody's just, when I call everybody, I just call and check in with people. How are you doing? What's going on? And people are just, well, we're doing the best we can. Some people already had their reimbursements and they can go ahead and start, but then other farmers, they don't have the reimbursements, so they say, well, we're just going to wait.
I appreciate you putting a human face on this, because a lot of times if you're watching the news or even tuning into this conversation, it's very difficult for us to recognize that these farmers are providing the food for us.
Correct.
And for the past few years, food costs and food prices have been an issue for a lot of Americans.
Correct.
This is potentially setting us up in a position where those fears aren't going to be alleviated at all. It's just potentially may increase. That's important. We have a call from Isaiah in Nashville. We're going to go to him. Isaiah, thank you for calling, my friend. What do you want to say?
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question regarding the tariffs in terms of Tennessee in general. And I know that a lot of companies, for instance, Volkswagen in Chattanooga is a big one. Nissan, although they're having their own issues financially. But when a lot of the people that work in Tennessee rely on these foreign companies who get these tax breaks to come to Tennessee to build factories and to offer jobs, how will the tariffs affect day-to-day lives of Tennesseans who are employed by these employers?
Steve?
Well, the way it's going to affect many Tennesseans, based on past episodes of tariffs, is some of them are going to lose their jobs. We did a study looking at tariffs on the automotive sector, and we didn't look at tariffs from Mexico and Canada. This would be a much bigger deal. But if you just looked at tariffs on Japan and the EU, we did an impact study of that, and it will cost about 8,000 jobs in Tennessee in the auto sector. So the first thing that's going to happen is people are going to lose their jobs. And then the second thing that's going to happen is people who relied on those people to purchase things from them, they're going to get hurt too. They may not lose their jobs, but if there's fewer people buying, I don't know what, your coffee or your groceries, or it's going to hurt you too. So,
what other industries in our state are under risk?
Well, of course, just in dollar percentage terms, it's the whiskey industry is going to get hammered. I mean, the dollar losses are going to be biggest in the automotive sector, which, by the way, means a lot more things than Nissan, right? It means all these auto part manufacturers. I think there's 2,400 manufacturing plants and auto parts in this state. But in terms of the industry that's going to get hammered the hardest, it's probably going to be the whiskey industry.
Now, thank you very much for giving us a call, Isaiah. I hope that answered your question, my friend.
Oh, it was great. Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of your day.
You as well. You as well. Okay, so Renee, we're going to go to break, but I do want to ask you this. There's another policy that's really affecting small farms, especially some small farms sign contracts to produce based on government reimbursements. You mentioned that a little bit. You may sign a contract to have a greenhouse to extend the growing season, or a wind turbine installed on your farm. And you kind of start hoping and preparing for growing season based on that reimbursement.
Correct.
What is going on with those programs right now? Are they under threat?
Yes. The short answer is yes. The background is nationwide, 1 million farmers receive USDA assistance. That's a given, and that's how farms operate in Tennessee and all over the world. And their USDA programs with the Farm Service Agency, with NRCS, and then we have funding opportunities through the state of Tennessee Department of Agriculture. So, we're talking about, I can run the acronym, CSP, CRP, EQIP.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, TAP, Climate Smart Commodities Projects, Inflation Reduction Acts, all of these funds, they come through as loans and grants. We call them contracts to help the farmer move forward. And so right now, again, the uncertainty and the freezing of everything, farmers are asking, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to cover these costs? And when you sign a contract, we usually sign contracts in the fall for this year. So like I said, some farmers may already have their money, but then some farmers don't have their money. And so, the programs, they cover anything from planting, installing trails, installing fences, being able to purchase seed and fertilizer and cover crops and all of these things that these programs support. And so when they become destabilized, then we as farmers are destabilized, and it's hard for us to move forward. So, I heard a story the other day about a lady that she just decided to pause on adding some more trees to her tree farm. And of course, tree farms are more than just lumber and timber to build houses and to build construction projects, but also trees clean the environment. They have a conservation benefit as well. So when you have 80% of the landowners in the state saying, I'm going to pause, that's going to be a huge impact for a lot of people. All
right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on tariffs and explore how this policy continues and could potentially affect jobs here in Tennessee. And it's also your turn to talk. We desperately want to hear from you. Give us a call, 615-760-2000, 615-760-2000. Stay with us. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Kulona, and this is Nashville. This hour, we've been discussing tariffs that have been in the news over the past 4 months. From learning how they work to potential impacts on our state, we're seeking to help you and us understand it a lot better. My guests are Renee Moore. She's the owner and manager of the Moore Family Century Farm in Benton County, and Dr. Stephen Livingston, political science professor and associate director of the Business and Economic Research Center at Middle Tennessee State University. And it's your turn to talk, so we want to hear from you. How do you feel about the tariffs? Are you concerned about rising prices? Give us a call and share your thoughts and comments. We got about 12 minutes, and we really want to hear your phone calls. Okay, so in the news, when they talk about these, the administration is saying that these tariffs will potentially give us a competitive advantage. I got to ask you both. But first, Renee, what do you think about the idea that negative economic impact is just temporary and eventually the economy will become stronger?
It depends on who you're talking to, I think. I can only speak from a small farm perspective, and I think from what we've heard historically, some of the larger farms may be able to weather the storm, but the smaller farms are really struggling. So when we think about the history, back in 2018, 2019, there was a bailout for farmers. And now we have the benefit of the data from the Department of Agriculture because they conduct a census. So if you compare 2017 to 2022 census agriculture and you look at the numbers for the state of Tennessee, presently we have 170,000. I'm sorry, 107,000 farmers. The number of farms are 63,000. That number is down from 2017. The number of acres, 10 million, down from 2017.
So you're saying it doesn't that potentially look good?
Correct. Expenses are up 31% at $4 billion. Higher labor costs are up $390 million. That's 25% increase. Expenses, 31% increase. So the data tells us different from what's being offered by the administration. So that's all I have to go on. Mm-hmm. And again, when you get on the ground, you may still have success stories. I'm sure we will, but overall, the data is telling us that statement may need to be challenged.
Steve, what about the hope that these tariffs will give businesses a competitive edge against cheaper Chinese goods? Will this happen?
Traditionally and in theory, tariffs take away a competitive edge. Tariffs are primarily a way of protecting certain businesses from competition. And so if the point is to be maximally competitive, you really don't want tariffs. There's a narrow argument called the infant industry argument, which says if a business is sort of brand new and won't survive unless you protect it for a while, there's an argument there. That's typically not the case for the United States because we're usually the first country to get the industry. We're not the last. So we sort of don't have the infant industry problem. But traditionally tariffs are used to protect industries from foreign competition. So how you turn that into an edge, got me.
Last week, the Trump administration announced that additional tariffs on auto, steel, and aluminum, as well as reciprocal tariffs, will go into effect on April 2nd. Steve, can you explain to us what reciprocal tariffs are?
I can, but my God. Somewhat simplified version. So right now, every country has its own tariff schedule, right? And something to just remind everybody, there's not one tariff. Every product has a different tariff on it.
Okay.
Or maybe I shouldn't say every product, but many, many products have different tariffs. Okay, so there's a tariff on auto parts. There's a different tariff on tires. There's a different tariff on steering wheels, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so every country's got these tariff schedules, and they've got all these different tariffs on different products. So reciprocal tariffs is this idea that the United States should have the same tariff on the same product as its trading partner. So if Portugal has an 11% tariff on steering wheels, we should have an 11% tariff on steering wheels. Okay, so far that's not that hard to figure out what's going on. You're still talking about thousands of tariffs. But how you do this when every country in the world has a different tariff schedule is
it's a lot of matching.
Unbelievable. I don't know.
Yeah, who's going to actually be looking through that?
Yes,
considering
and if you don't want to hire God knows how many more customs officials, you've really it's going to be very difficult to do this.
Definitely. Okay, we're going to go to Carla in Gallatin. Carla, thank you for calling us. What would you like to ask?
Yes, I just want to briefly ask, at what point do you think these tariffs, when they go into effect, how long are they going to last? How long do the American people have to put up with having tariffs? Do they have a timeline? Do they have a plan for that? That is my question.
Well, there's no timeline. The whole process has been a bit unusual. Usually Congress passes laws that set tariffs, and those last until Congress changes the law. These are being done by executive actions, and by statute, there's no way of knowing how long it'll last.
Carla, let me ask you this. When you talk to your friends, family, and neighbors about these economic policies and these tariffs, what are those conversations like?
A lot of fear, uncertainty, chaos. People don't know what to think because, like your guest said, tariffs haven't been implemented in a very long time. And at this high level, people are extremely scared, and rightfully so.
Are you already making changes to your personal economic plan? Is your family already looking to save money or cut expenses in particular ways to kind of head off any of the detrimental impacts of this?
Yeah, we unfortunately do have to look ahead at what it is that we can save, or what can we try to purchase now before prices rise, because we're looking for a car, we're looking for some higher priced items, and it absolutely affects our budget. And it does change the numbers in our personal budget.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very disturbing.
Yes.
Personally.
I understand. Well, I really appreciate you calling in and talking with us, Carla. I really do. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, okay?
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you.
You guys are amazing.
Thank you. All right. Well, a couple of minutes left, but I have a question. Like, are industries going to stop or slow down their production while they wait to see what happens with the rest of us?
I think there's a short-term, long-term. Longer term, I think they are going to be much more careful about making big investments until they can see what's going to happen. The short term has got some weird incentives because you know what's going on right now? People are importing like crazy because they want to get the stuff before the tariffs get put on there. And so that means that some businesses are producing like mad because there's huge demand right now.
Mm-hmm.
So
who wins from all of this? Is there a winner with all of these tariffs and the uncertainty we're facing right now?
Depends on who you ask.
I get that. But who potentially is winning? Like, who's coming out on top? Who is looking pretty right now because of policy?
So I would say that relatively uncompetitive businesses would be helped because they're going to be shielded
from all of this.
Yeah.
You know, I'm wondering where some of these tariff numbers come from initially. Like, if we have a 7% tariff on trucks, why do we have a 7% tariff on trucks? Who comes up with that number?
That almost all of those have been negotiated since the 1950s in a series of negotiations that go on. Most recently, they went on in the World Trade Organization. And so, yeah, they don't seem rational, but it is countries in the same room wheeling and dealing.
Mm-hmm. Renee?
No, I just wanted to respond to the caller, and I just felt her, what she said. And I think as we wrap up, I want us to think about taking care of ourselves. Self-care is so important, and we have to do that first to weather this transition and change that we're going through right now. So, we're talking about get some sleep, eat, look at something positive, drink some water, take a walk, have some fun. That's the foundation of it. And then from there, if you need to advocate, if you need to join a coalition, if you need to reach out to your elected official, if you need to contact the USDA about your contract.
Make sure you have enough self-care and rest so you can do all those things.
Yes, exactly. So that just came to me when I was listening to her.
These are unprecedented times, and now we're faced with unprecedented decisions to do. But most importantly, we have to make sure we take care of ourselves and those we care about. I really appreciate you both being on here to explain to us what tariffs are, to hopefully alleviate some of the anxieties that people are feeling, or it may have increased. Who knows? We can do a show about that in the future. I want to thank my guests, Renee Moore, the owner and manager of the Moore Family Century Farm in Benton County, and Dr. Stephen Livingston, political science professor and associate director of the Business and Economic Research Center at Middle Tennessee State University. Again, thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Mary Mancini. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our board operators, Liv Lombardi. Catherine Cece's was on the phones. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation does not end here. As I said before, comment and tell us what you want to hear on the show. We actually play your messages, so call us, 615-751-2500. You can find us on the socials, Blue Sky, Instagram, and X at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Colonna. We'll see you on Monday, everybody. And to be good to each other.